The next night it was time. Preparations for everything were ready. The sun had gone down just a bit before the kids would be actively partying, so I walked right into the apartment complex. I had spent the morning getting everyone set for their roles, and coming up with a strategy. Hopefully it would be enough. So I entered the apartment complex, noticing the many cameras hanging around the lobby. The lack of people hanging around like there tended to be in apartment buildings like this. I also noticed the stairs were closed off. A heavy-duty security gate. More interesting was the fact the ground floor stairs didn't have a stairway down into the apartment's basement. I smirked. This might actually be easier than I expected. I went to the elevator, which didn't have the security shards you would find in higher-level apartments, so it opened without issue. It did, I noticed, have a newer control pad. The netrunner had obviously wanted to be able to shut down the elevator as he wanted. But it took me up to the roof, why wouldn't it? I was just a teenager here to see the party after all. As I stepped out, I looked over the gathered crowd. Old couches, and some beach chairs scattered around, an actual fire pit made out of a barrel. I didn't even want to guess at what they were burning in there. The crowd was my focus though. I needed to know who the leaders were. Not the leader of the gang, who I knew to be some old guy, just a thief using kids as muscle. No, I needed to know who led the kids. Who was it they all looked up to and respected? But since I wasn't a street kid in the same way all of these teens were, I had delegated. My new assistant would be here to back me up. Of course I noticed him right away. The gonk was actually selling BDs like usual. I rolled my eyes as I walked up behind Knox and peeked over his shoulder as he was holding open his backpack full of BD wrappers. Hey, BD's nice. Got anything good? I asked in a joking tone, pretending not to know what he was selling, as Knox suddenly smiled at my appearance and nodded. A few things you might like, he said with a funny smirk. Thanks for letting me know about the party. I replied simply, confirming our little lie. Who's your customer? I asked, looking up at the boy that Knox had been speaking with. He was about what I expected from a street kid teenager. Total poser. He was wearing a jacket that was modeled after some action movie star from the last couple years, which I only recognized because I had seen one of the movies on the TV and it was May. Richard Steele, he said, and I nodded along despite the fact I knew his last name wasn't Steele. He was in the NCPD database. Richard Gonzalez. Minor theft, and a record for Grand Theft Auto. Heck, it went out on a joyride with some gonk's car. But if that was what he wanted for his street name, it didn't bother me. Knox, my man, you didn't tell me you were bringing a pretty girl. Ever hung out with a gang before? Richard asked, turning to me with a smile. I literally had to keep from bursting out laughing. He was flirting with me. Badly. Or, it was like a puppy growling trying to act tough. Once or twice. Family connections to the claws. Have I heard of your gang before? I asked as I settled into the seat next to Knox. Not yet. But straight-lane shooters will be all over Night City eventually, he demanded with the overconfidence of a teenager with a gun. Knox had done his job perfectly. I had asked him to head up an hour or so before I arrived, and find the leader of the kids, and point him out to me. He had done just that. Richard Steele was a bit of a blowhard, I could tell, but he had a certain overconfidence, and more importantly there were eyes on him. Plenty of the kids were seated around him like he was the one in charge, looking to him, and letting him talk. He was the most popular kid here, with a clique of friends all wanting to hang out with him. What was funnier is that I guess he wasn't bad looking for a teenager, but there were a few narrowed eyes from some of the girls sitting around us, glaring at me. Don't worry girls, not my type. Probably spent too much time in front of a mirror every morning. I'll look forward to it. I've always wondered, how did it all work? I mean, how does a bunch of street kids end up with so much iron? I asked, nodding my head to one of the gangers that had an axe assault rifle across his lap as he chatted up a cute girl. That sort of hardware obviously wasn't standard street kid fare. I mean, not everyone was a gamer like me. Our boss is an amazing planner. He set us up, we ended up clapping a weapons shipment, most of it was sold off, but we got to keep plenty of iron, he said as he reached into his jacket and to my surprise pulled out a TKI-20 Shingane. A smart SMG. A very expensive smart SMG. That was actually a pretty dangerous weapon for anyone not wearing good armor, an ECM, or good enough subdermal. Nice iron. I couldn't help but compliment him and mean it. Although I noticed his hands as he put it away. He didn't actually have the smart link chrome to use the smart system. It would be a dangerous SMG but not the homing bullet monster that it could be. Interesting. Hey, it's just one of the benefits of being SLS. He called out and it took me a minute to realize that SLS meant straight lane shooters. Thankfully I was using cold blood to keep calm, otherwise I would have been giggling up a storm. Nox thankfully knew what I was here for, and distracted the conversation, saving me from awkward flirting as he cut in and started talking up his wares again. I fell back out of the conversation, not disappearing, as I listened to Richard talk to Nox, and the general conversations around. Although Richard really was focusing too much on me. Something Nox had obviously noticed, and was trying to distract him. Thanks Nox. You're saving me from awkward flirting right now, I won't forget it. It was almost time. Eventually Nox actually made a sale of my BD. The Maelstrom assault was apparently interesting, I guess. Afterwards I made a motion with my head and Nox, rather than trying to sell any more, headed to the elevator. I watched to make sure it actually opened for him, and once he was gone I gave him another minute or two to hit the ground floor. His job was done. Thankfully I was still interesting enough that Richard didn't wander away, instead flirting and offering me a beer, which I took but wasn't going to actually drink. Instead, after waiting long enough for Nox to get out of the building, I asked a question. So who's your boss? I don't see him around, I say as I lean back and watch the kid's reaction. He frowned a bit. The boss is busy, and doesn't deal with the gang directly except through me. I get the gigs and I hand them out, he said, suddenly shifting from a happy teenager flirting around, to a street kid sensing something is off. Cool, then I'll chat with you. Why do you work for this older gonk, and his netrunner buddy? You gotta know they plan on just using you as muscle? That eventually you are going to piss off someone that doesn't care you're all kids? My question was loud enough the whole rooftop seemed to hear it, as a lot of the conversation went quiet. The kids sitting around Richard all focusing on me, noticing something was up. I wasn't following the script Richard was expecting. Suddenly I wasn't just a cute girl to flirt with and he was the big gangbanger. I was dangerous. Especially since I went cold, shifting myself just so, in the way that my perk knowledge from Fearless Chill prompted me. The movement would suddenly turn me into a predator, a fearless creature despite being in their home. The fuck are you on about? Morgan and V3L0 City are the only reason we have the eddies and iron to protect ourselves. He nearly shouted back, not just at me, but at the crowd. Seems the kids weren't all happy with their older overlord, and Richard was trying to hype them up. Protect yourselves? From what? Another poser gang? Or just a street gang down the street? They aren't threats anyways. You are playing in the big leagues, any merc would chew through all of you like a meat grinder. I tell them honestly as I lean in. You've been taking expensive gigs. The sort of gigs that people notice. The sort of gigs that the people you stole from don't just pretend never happened. Like they do for the minor shit, I explained bluntly. If anyone is gonk enough to come after us, we have security and plenty of iron, he said, glaring, and his hand only inches from reaching for his gun. Cute. The gonk thought he could quick draw me? I snorted. I really did, unable to resist. You mean all the security systems that are set up to tell the netrunner he has someone on his ass so he can escape? I asked. The elevator alone had told me what the plan was. There was a basement in the apartment complex. One that was on Wacoco's old blueprints, obviously the best place to hide the netrunner. Secure it down and create an exit, and boom, you have the best defended place for him. With a bit of remodeling, the fact the stairs no longer actually led into the basement, stopping anyone from being able to access the basement, and boom. Underground bunker. The kids might not realize it, but I did. Ping had shown me the truth of the netrunner's plans. I was lucky that I had trained so much on sneaking my quick hack into systems. The netrunner had never noticed. And because of it, and Malcolm's eyes, we already won. He just didn't know it yet. These kids weren't being crafted into a future big gang. They were just a meat wall and muscle, a smokescreen and a useful crew to pick up loot. At least that's my assumption. I didn't have much faith some older guys would actually care about the street kids. Either way, I was sure the Netrunner had an escape plan. Which is why I was up here, on the roof, dragging all the attention to me. "What the hell are you playing at?" Richard demanded, standing up and trying to loom over me. Looking aggressive, but of course failing as only a teenage boy could. Thinking they were so much more intimidating than they are. My eyes flashed gold for a half second as I blinked. Sending a text. Simple. "I'm one of those mercs that are here to kill your Netrunner, and boss," I explained calmly, letting that fact ripple through the crowd. Then I moved. The poor kid had already shown me exactly where his Shingen was holstered. I had him locked down within a second, my strength for once actually surpassing an enemy, chrome arms, and my high body gave me the advantage, and skill took care of the rest. He was locked down, his Shingen in my hand as I held it up to his temple. Unlike Richard, the first had a smart link, and it was pretty cool, the first time I had connected with a smart weapon. But I had bigger problems. The entire crew on the roof were glaring at me, guns gathering together. "You won't get out of here," Richard grunted, and I shook his head. "Who said I'm going anywhere?" I asked, and it wasn't long after that an explosion was heard downstairs. It was in the lobby, but only I knew that. My team was on it. I grinned as I felt the tension ratchet up. "Let Richard go," a girl said, holding a Sutara at her hip, glaring at me. "The elevator is already shut down, you're trapped." I had planned on keeping them occupied a bit longer, but why bother? Not when I'm given such a perfect line. "Silly girl. You think I'm trapped up here with you? But it's the opposite. I've trapped you up here with me. Well, at least somewhat," I tell her with a wink as I back up, hauling Richard along with me as a shield, causing all the kids to follow after me. "What are you doing?" Richard nearly squealed as I brought him right up to the ledge around the roof. "Hey Richard. Your people are actually pretty protective of you. We'll talk after all this is over, okay? No reason to have any of your chums die tonight. So just stay up here until the bullets stop," I told him simply, and then I pushed him forward and stepped backwards up onto the ledge, and then took another step backwards, staring into the faces of all the teens looking at me in shock. And leapt. Dash. Richard Steele. This night wasn't going how it was supposed to. It was supposed to be another party, another show of how much better things are now that they joined the SLS. Now that Richard worked with V3L0 City, and Morgan the old man was the face, since V3L0 City was a hermit never leaving the net. But it had been going so well. Eddies, guns, respect. He had it all. Sure, he knew Morgan and V3L0 City weren't planning on sticking around forever. But that was fine. Richard would drain them for their intel until his gang was strong. The cold kiss of his own weapon against his temple told him just how little he was prepared. "Who was this girl?" "Hey Richard," she prompted, taking his full attention. Not that he wasn't already very aware of his position with the way she had grappled his arm behind his back and gun against his face. "Your people are actually pretty protective of you. We'll talk after all this is over, okay? No reason to have any of your chums die tonight. So just stay up here until the bullets stop." "What?" "Wah," he gasped as his wrist was pushed forward, forcing him to practically fall forward, and then he was free. He turned just in time to see that crazy purple-haired girl step backwards, arms spread and the brightest smile across her face. She fell off the roof. "No way," he gasped as he rose up and peeked over, joining a few of his crew that were doing the same, only to watch as she was not only still alive, but actually leaping from broken pieces of the apartment, to air conditioners, to finally an old sign pole that she caught and spun herself around before dropping, landing on the ground in a crouch. She glanced up, and from this distance all he could see was her eyes glowing red in the neon lights of the street level. And then she was gone, rushing down the street. "Richard. Martin, check the elevator. It's locked down. You know Vel's rules." The moment he noticed trouble he would lock down. To protect himself. "Yeah. I'll call Morgan, try to let him know. Just give me a second." He pulled out his agent from his pocket and started hammering at the number. That bitch had at least dropped his gun. Dash. That was so much fun. I was practically giggling as I raced to meet up with my chums. The plan overall was pretty simple. gather up almost all of the gang's forces in one spot, and thanks to their own policy lock them down. I hadn't been sure if the Netrunner would lock down the elevator or not at first, but after confirming there was no other way down to the basement I had been sure. Although I hadn't actually blocked off the stairs, a grenade that was mostly smoke and flash at the base of the stairs had done a good job of keeping them clear for now. Besides, what teenager was going to think about the staircase? The building was 6 stories tall. I doubt any of them had ever even used the damn stairs. I was glad the elevator had been shut down though. I hadn't wanted to risk trying to hack it. If the Netrunner was any good I might end up in serious trouble if I tried. But I hadn't needed to blow up the whole thing. The grenades Malcolm had tossed into the lobby, only after making sure it was empty, had done what I expected. The security the Netrunner had set up went on lockdown. Elevator was locked down, and without security shards or anything, obviously the kids wouldn't be able to activate it. Probably that had been done on purpose. One of the biggest risks the Netrunner had was the kids deciding to kill him after all. Then I would just parkour down the side of the building. I had already found multiple paths down the other night when I was scoping out the place. Then came the best part. See, Ichi, Malcolm, and Hiromi were hanging out the back of Ichi's truck with my favorite girl HMG. They would keep the front of the apartment complex locked down, and make it seem like we were preparing to assault the Netrunner. What would a coward do when confronted like this? He would run. I giggled as I raced across the street to an office building just across the way. My ping the other night had revealed all the security systems that were connected together by the Netrunner. Normally this wouldn't be that important, since I wasn't sneaking in, but Malcolm had noticed something weird. One of the lines of the security system had stretched across the street. With a short visit to the other building I had found the basement, and the odd little hatch hidden away in a corner of the basement. The hatch that was a recent construction, and had obviously been broken through the old concrete wall, and had a very familiar brand of security keypad attached to it. An escape hatch. So I jogged down. My chums were causing a commotion at the entrance, and looking at it from a camera it would look like an assault squad preparing to storm the place. The hatch hadn't been opened yet, and I settled into a dark corner of the basement to wait. It didn't take long, a few quiet minutes of waiting, though I was in a call with Hiromi confirming that everything was quiet at their end, when finally I heard it. Muffled footsteps echoing through the brickwork and hushed voices. I smirked as I waited, and then the hatch beeped open. A man stepped out. This wasn't the Netrunner. Morgan Fields was a tall man, he had chrome, but was no Borg. No, he hadn't ever been good enough for that. He had originally been a member of 6th Saint Sox Army, but he had only been a private, even at the end of the last war. He hadn't ever amounted to anything, at least according to Waikako's information, and had fled from 6th Street. After fucking up. He had gotten drunk and punched a higher up in the gang. They hadn't liked that. So he had joined up with a chum of his V3L0 City. A Netrunner of some talent. Although really he was just the face of the Netrunner who apparently hated disconnecting from the net. And as Morgan looked around, his eyes sliding right over where I was hiding, unable to pierce the darkness, Vel stepped out of the hatch. Stumbling a bit and actually shivering. The man was emaciated. Practically a skeleton in his suit. Unlike Morgan, he was a Borg. Almost everything chest up was chrome. Yeah, the guy was definitely a cyber psycho. Probably obsessed with being on the web. I gave you one job. Vel muttered out, his voice completely robotic. Keep everything quiet so I could net run. It's not the time, we need to move before whoever's after us catches up. Complain to me later, Morgan said as he grabbed the Netrunner's arm and started hauling him away. Which is when I stepped out and aimed my boya. The first round was deafening in the enclosed space, but it certainly did its work, a massive hole blown into the Netrunner, putting him out of the fight, as I aimed and fired at Morgan. He was better than I thought. By the time the first round hit, he was already jumping to the side, causing my shot to miss as it blew a crater in the concrete wall. Fuck. He cursed as he shoved a weapon over the edge of the ancient steel machines littering the basement. Fuck. I dodged, and then rolled around, just saving myself as the smart ammunition could track me all the way around the machine I was now hiding behind. The fucker had a Shigane too. You cocksucker. I'm gonna kill you for fucking vel like that, he roared, and I just went cold. I was probably going to get shot a few times here, but I just had to take out the fucker first. Unfortunately, Mike Hiroshi had already lost track of him. Between each of our hurried movements, the software that let me tell where someone is through walls had lost track. So it was a gunfight with both of us hiding in the dark. Unfortunately for Morgan, I was made for the dark. I rose up and started stalking, sticking to darkness and tight holes that I managed to slip through without too much effort as I crept closer and closer to where he should still be. And as I got closer, I tried to listen for something, only for the ringing in my ears to block that sense. Note to self: earplugs, or a hearing protection in general. Couldn't deafen myself every time I used the Bouya in an enclosed space like this. So I relied on my sight, and ninjutsu in general, to stay hidden as I hugged the wall circling around him. Until I saw him. He was looking around wildly, trying to find where I was. His body had been pulled into cover as well, and the Borg was seemingly laying there dead as white blood poured out around him. Poor guy, never even noticed me as I raised my Bouya up. But then suddenly I felt it. An attack, and assault I had never experienced before. Instantly my mind went to defend it. I was being quick-hacked. My defenses rose up, the knowledge I had gained from a perk so long ago the only thing stopping the program from instantly smashing my defenses. Cybersecurity. I hadn't even thought of the perk I had taken for level 2 quick hacks, since I got it. But I was glad I did. It was the only reason I knew enough about defending myself that I didn't get immediately battered down. I couldn't even fire before Morgan was alerted, forcing me to leap backwards, grunting as a smart round slammed into my side. That was probably a rib breaking. Damn it. I slipped back, trying to go for another angle, but the hack assault was so powerful. I was losing. Something slipped past me into my cyberdeck and spread around. I gasped as my arms spasmed, jerked and literally sparked as a program was forced into my system, the assault so overwhelming I couldn't stop it before the effect already hit. Oh, that's where he was. Fuck, sneaky bastard bitch. Fucking hell, that's just a girl, Morgan said as he walked over, turning the corner to see me on the floor, gritting my teeth as my arms literally kept shocking me even as they turned and tweaked in weird angles. Bouya was still in my hand though. I just needed. Hey, he chuckled before raising the Shingain and firing. I grunted and gasped as he dumped whatever rounds he had left in his magazine into my chest. My leotard blocked a few rounds here and there, but he was pumping plenty of holes into me. I couldn't breathe. He turned and walked away even as I felt myself starting to die. The quick hack suddenly ended. They thought I was dead. I reached down with jerking hands and managed to grab a Mac stock. A few moments later, despite not having any air to breathe in my lungs, I depressed it into my mouth and suddenly I was alive. I rolled over gasping quietly, as I spat out blood clearing my lungs. I grabbed another Mac stock and huffed that one down too. Fuck. I hadn't been thinking about the Netrunner. The Borged Netrunner, which meant until he was dead, he was still alive. People only die when they are killed, Motoko. I rose up angry. More at myself than anything, but maybe partially at the fucker that just shot me up. I turned the corner to see the bastard trying to carry his Netrunner tomb out of the basement. Bouya barked twice, the surprise completely catching Morgan off guard. There was no attempts to jump away, or gunfight this time. He was carrying his buddy and couldn't escape. Then I brought up my Lexington and dumped an entire mag into both of them. Then I reloaded my Bouya and shot all 4 rounds into both bodies. Just to be sure. I checked them both after just to be sure inside when they were both very dead. 1000 XP gained. 750 XP gained. Fuck. I winced, leaning against the machinery for a minute as I caught my breath, my chest aching with every breath. I probably had multiple broken ribs. What a massive fuck up. I hadn't expected the Netrunner to survive after taking a Bouya round to his back. It had almost cost me everything. I took a breath and let it out. I had to be better than this. I should have fired another round into the Netrunner while I was escaping. Should have made sure he was dead. I shook it off. I wasn't invincible. I would learn from this. I wiped myself down so I wasn't covered in blood and then zipped up my jacket. Looking at least semi-presentable, I took pictures of the two fuckers and sent it off to Waco to confirm the gig was complete as I headed back out of the building towards my tombs. They were still waiting at the entrance. Truck backed up and ready to be loaded up, but all of them were armed and ready in case the teenagers decided to cause problems. The Netrunner and his tomb are dead, I called out as I walked up, doing my best not to stumble. Broken ribs hurt. Hiromi immediately fist-pumped while hissing a yes as she bounced out of the truck. Great job, Motoko. I knew you could take care of those losers. She cheered and I winced. Yeah, well, their Netrunner was good. Better than I thought. I grumbled, which instantly made her start freaking out. I just waved her off. Broken rib, I think. I'll get checked out with Vic after. But we need to loot up. I'm gonna unlock the elevator, and then you guys are gonna be looting everything to the bedrock, while I unfortunately am stuck on guard duty. I told them as I walked past them into the building and towards the elevator. I was cautious about interfacing with anything that the netrunning Borg had set up, so I hesitated for a moment as I reached to plug in my cord, but eventually I stuck it in. And then sighed. Thankfully, without his direct action, his security was good, but not something that could stop me, or kill me. 5 minutes later the elevator opened up and I sighed. I only unlocked this and the basement floor. Give me a minute to make sure there aren't any traps, I told them, but Hiromi was at my side before the elevator could close on me. You're hurt. Motoko, let us handle that. None of you are netrunners. It'll be okay, I just want to make sure there aren't any HMG turrets or mines or something, I told her, but while she winced at that, she didn't back up. Nuh-uh. I'm coming too, she demanded, and I sighed, not really in the mood to argue. Instead I just shrugged and activated the elevator. I would just push her out of the way if something went bad. The elevator dropped down into a net-running paradise. Nice. I couldn't help but mutter because there was so much gear down here. Wakako had come through. She hadn't just found me a netrunner with some stuff. She had found me a netrunner with a ton of stuff. Wakako, I love you. Wow. That's a lot of eddies, Hiromi muttered, and I shook my head. Not so much, remember most of this is stuff I'm keeping. Oh right, for your netrunning. Still so weird that you like that stuff, you used to hate it. Before, I mean. Hiromi seemed to backpedal, but I just smiled at her. It's okay. I know I'm different now. It doesn't bother me, I told her, and she nodded, and then she looked around and said something that broke all of my plans. So where are you going to put all this stuff anyways? Put? I looked around. The basement was huge. And pretty full of cords and server racks, and a big netrunning chair that would be integral to my netrunning. Oh. Fuck. This complicated everything. Where was I supposed to take all of this shit? I took a seat and started thinking. No way even a tenth of this would fit in the apartment. I mean, the chair alone would take up my entire closet bedroom. There had been a definite fuck up on my part here. Damn it, Motoko, you needed to stop playing around. This should have been planned out where it would go before jumping headfirst into this raid. Okay, I couldn't hold it at home, and while Ichi's truck could probably haul most of it out, it wouldn't be everything, and I didn't want to keep his truck filled with my shit. A storage unit maybe? They weren't exactly safe, but if no one knew it was mine, and we kept quiet. Alright, Motoko, Hiromi said, suddenly startling me as I looked up at her from where I had been glaring at the floor. All taken care of. She threw me a thumbs up as if that explained everything. What's taken care of? I asked, not following Hiromi's thought process. Well, it just so happens the last 2 gonks that were using this basement were just flatlined. Shocker, I know. So I just called the owner of the building and explained we were taking the place over. He argued. I informed him that I was standing in the same room with the merc that had flatlined the previous owner. He showed he had a brain and accepted that the basement was ours. Welcome to your new netrunner room. Hiromi cheered, looking proud of herself. Hiromi had taken over then, to my surprise, as I was still processing the fact I now had a new place. A new home if I wanted. I didn't want a new place. I liked the old place. Just because it was a little small was no reason to get something new. But Hiromi overrode my concerns entirely as she tugged me along and we went up to the first floor to get everyone. To my surprise though, Nox was there hanging out around Ichi and Malcolm. "Hey Motoko." Motoko's tune. He greeted Hiromi and funnily enough Ichi and Malcolm were side-eyeing him like he was a threat. "Hey Nox. Thanks again for helping me out. You good?" I asked, confused about why he was still here. "Yeah, I just wanted to see this through. Not every day you get to see something this crazy," he offered with a shrug and a smirk. I almost matched his shrug but thought better of it as my rib twinged. "That's fine. We are going to head up and chat with the kids. Might end up in a firefight," I warned and he nodded, reaching into his backpack and pulling out a Mox-painted Unity. "I want to see this through. If I can?" I flashed him a thumbs up and nodded my head towards the elevator and we all clambered inside. This was the important part. Would we be able to do this without killing anyone else? I looked to Hiromi, who was honestly the one leading us at this point. Hiromi was eager to get to the roof, but I could tell she was a little nervous as she played with the katana on her hip. Malcolm had a massive grin on his face. He was carrying my HMG. Bastard was giving that back just as soon as I could carry her again. And Ichi just hefted his shotgun and was holding it ready to use. The elevator binged open to a roar of voices, but all of them were clear. "Morgan. This crazy gonk. Finally. Did you have to? Why did it take so long to kill one?" Of course the voices went silent when they realized it wasn't their previous boss stepping out of the elevator. Hello. I'm Hiromi." Hiromi called out as she stepped out like she was the boss. Her nervous fidgeting from just before gone. "Sorry about the trouble, but it's over now. The old man and the netrunner that previously helped you out are zeroed. Sorry about that," she chirped out all the while smiling. I wasn't sure what her crazy plan was, but I was carrying a gun in both hands, everything reloaded and ready to fire if any of the kids took a shot. "Fuck." A voice echoed out and it was Richard. "You fucked us," he said, sounding absolutely infuriated as he stomped through the crowd towards Hiromi, which stilled when I got between him and suddenly he was staring down my boya. Some of the kids around him also raised their guns, but he would be dead before they fired. Before I could talk Hiromi did. Now. No need to bring this to violence. The fight's already over you know? So let's all have a talk about what the new situation is," she said as she walked forward brazenly and settled into one of the seats and grabbed a beer, seemingly waiting for Richard to join her. "Hiromi? What the hell were you plotting?" An hour later I knew. Hiromi had made a deal. I no longer had any idea of what was happening. She had sat down Richard and basically talked him into a peaceful arrangement with Section 9. Hiromi literally called us Section 9. If not for cold blood keeping me calm I knew my head would have exploded. It had just been a joke. No one could know. We were a poser gang now. But in the end none of the kids had died. The killing was over, and they wouldn't get much out of attacking us. Hiromi had convinced them that allowing us to borrow the basement, and having a netrunner working out of the apartment complex it would mean they could rely on my work making sure the security system continued working, and maybe be willing to accept some work from them from time to time. In exchange Section 9 would also have access to a horde of teenaged gangbangers ready to work as muscle if we ever needed. I had given up on being involved in the agreement at this point. I was tired, still angry at myself for getting shot and ready to head to Vic's for a nap. And I was just nodding along as Hiromi took over the details I didn't want to deal with. But in the end to my surprise it worked. The kids seemed happy enough to be in charge of themselves, at least for now. Hiromi would be their contact with Section 9. Which meant they would thankfully leave me alone, and I had a place to do my net running from and some security while doing it. Thankfully with the process finishing Hiromi pulled us out, wishing Richard a good night, and with the elevator operational again, the party was now over. My group took the elevator down first to the ground floor and to Ichi's truck. "I can't believe that worked," I muttered looking over at Hiromi who had been absolutely preening for the last hour as she ran the kids around into a deal. "You should just trust me. It was easy enough for someone like me," she said primping her hair with a hand. "Well I'm just glad I don't have to deal with this," Ichi said with a smile then instantly pointing a finger at Hiromi and I. "This is all your trouble." "Don't be silly Ichi. If we need a truck, of course we will call you, and with the SLS Section 9 affiliation, we may be doing more big work. Hiromi offered, raising a hand up to her mouth and laughing. A princess laugh? Really? I asked in between chuckles at Hiromi's actions. Of course. I just did something amazing. Do you know how good having groomed a gang will look to my rep? She asked, looking proud of herself. Why did no one ever tell me how fun this whole fixer thing could be? Of course the corporate found her true calling, Malcolm teased, but the bite in his words were thankfully softened by the way he nudged her after. Just remember us street kids when you were at the top of Arasaka Tower. Who are you again? The chauffeur? She instantly retorted, earning a squawk of outrage from Malcolm and giggles from Ichi and I. I winced a bit at the end though. Stupid rib. Alright chooms. Thanks. For everything. I wouldn't have been able to do this without you. I told them. Don't worry about it, Motoko. We are chooms. Considering how much you pull us along, it felt good to be able to actually help out, Hiromi said with a shrug. Besides, we've been getting a lot out of this for a while. Eddies, rep, chrome. She muttered, counting off her fingers. The pay is good, Malcolm said, teasing, and that was that from him. Hey, it was. Preem. I've never been this close to something this crazy before. Nox offered. The boy had been quietly following behind us the whole time, not really taking part. Hey, you were instrumental. Thanks, Nox. Is the pay enough? I asked, and he snorted. Don't be silly, I still have a ton from all the eddies I've made from the BDs that I haven't handed over to you yet. Oh? That's right, you are the one selling my Motoko's XPDs. I think we should talk. Hiromi offered with a shark-like grin as she started stalking towards Nox. Well, that wasn't something I was going to get in the middle of. Well, I kinda need a visit to Vic's. So I'm gonna get out of here. Malcolm, put my HMG back in my trunk please. I glared at the boy who had been sneakily walking off towards Ichi's truck. It's not that bad, Vic. I muttered, but the look he gave me kept me silent. Alright, all of you, head on out. Motoko, we'll be fine, but we are going to need some privacy. He ordered, shooing Hiromi and Nox out of the clinic with his dad energy. Both had followed me to Vic's, Hiromi dragging Nox around to talk more about his work. I continued to ignore Hiromi getting involved in that. I was more focused on Vic, because I was feeling like I was about to get yelled at. Mind explaining why you have bullet holes through your leotard? I got shot. A lot. Fuck, I had a smart SMG. Well, now I have a smart SMG. I admitted with a sigh. How are you still alive? You told me your healing takes 8 hours, he demanded, rolling in next to me. I get if can't tell me, if someone is keeping you from talking about it, but no, it's not that. Honest. No one but you knows about it, Vic. If I take a max stock, it sorta supercharges the healing for a bit. I guess I just didn't share that bit. Sorry. I offered, actually wincing. I probably should have told Vic that last time. That makes even less sense. He muttered, rubbing his nose under his glasses. The only thing in a max stock is, well, nothing that would cause rapid onset healing. Those things are just adrenaline, and some never mind. It doesn't matter. It causes you to heal? Yeah, pretty quickly, just about everything but broken bones. Okay, you are staying the night. We are going to test just what a max stock actually does to you. Jesus, Motoko, kid. Rapid healing could have millions of side effects, Vic sighed, seemingly trying hard to resist ranting at me. It was sweet. If it made me a little ashamed. I knew it was safe because gamer. But I couldn't exactly explain that to him. Sorry, Vic. I'm fairly certain it's safe? Testing. He decided, nodding, firmly patting me on the shoulder as he actually went to close off the clinic doors so no one could come in. Now, kid, lose the leotard, it's a loss anyways. I have a medical gown here somewhere you can wee Jesus, kid. He grumbled as he jerked his head away from where I was already peeling down my leotard. What? Just put this on. He rumbled at me as he tossed one of those backless medical gowns a patient might wear. Okay. I don't know why you are being weird, you are like 3 times my age. I snarked at him, only to earn a choked back laugh. Motoko, you're 14. I'm about 6 times your age. Wait, what? I'm 74, kid, he said as he wheeled back around on his chair to start strapping sensors to me. Wait. Was the reason Vic's dad energy was so intense because it was actually Grandpa energy? Vic ended up holding me the entire rest of the night, running tests on my healing and trying to figure out why a max doc causes a healing effect. In the end he had discovered a lot, and had more questions than he had before. But I had escaped. A quick call to my quadra had it drive over so I could head home and I was gone. The apartment was quiet as I entered and I immediately went into my room, thankful that June wasn't here, as I peeled my ruined leotard off and threw it into the bag I kept all of my damaged clothes. I would need to make sure June didn't find that until I fixed them or scrapped them. I took a quick shower to finish cleaning up and then once more suited up I was in the living room with just the barest hints of sunlight starting to filter in through the armored blinds. What do I do now? I sighed, as I flopped onto the couch. I wasn't entirely satisfied with the situation with the kids. I really didn't want to deal with having any affiliation with some random street gang, especially one that had been one step away from being wiped out for being too greedy. The kids were going to be a massive pain in the ass. I just knew it. And I didn't want to see them die. It was bound to happen. Night City wasn't kind to anyone. I shook it off. I could only be responsible for the people close to me. That's all. Just that. If the SLS get themselves killed, hopefully I won't ever know. I stood up, grabbing a bunch of my net gear from around the apartment and headed out. There was one more thing I needed, and then I would go back to my new netrunning den. Purchasing a full netrunner suit with the cooling system still active had taken a hit to my funds, but it was too important not to have. I didn't want to melt my brain like I almost had before. The old seamstress lady that I had bought all my leotards from was more than willing to make the sale, especially since I ordered a few more of my leotards as well. I kept getting bullet holes in the damn things after all. I drove my quadra over to the apartment complex. Straight lane apartments. I muttered to myself, forced to shake my head that the kids had literally named themselves after the complex itself. This complex was old, and it was run down. I wouldn't be surprised if everyone here was literally just squatting in a semi-abandoned building. Then again, lights were on, and the water still ran, so someone must own the building and keep things running. It didn't even have a garage attached to it. Instead I had been forced to park the quadra in a space a block down the street and walk the rest of the way. I noticed pretty quickly that I was getting attention. Kids were staring at me. Some I recognized from the gang, and some I didn't. I had no doubt that something as big as the SLS losing their netrunner, and losing their big league gigs was spreading around. And that they now had a new leader. All the while some teenager with purple hair had flatlined their old boss. Or they might even have put a hit out on me, telling the kids to try and flatline me the moment I walked back into the building, just to save Richard the hassle of dealing with us. But that was just my paranoia. Richard had more use of me alive, or rather he needed a netrunner to keep his stuff running, and maybe pass on intel to point his kids at gigs that they could do and make eddies. Morgan and V3L0 City had targeted weapon shipments, or netrunning supplies with his horde of kids. The SLS didn't exist before that. I doubted Richard had suddenly gained all the knowledge needed to run a gang. As I entered the complex I wasn't surprised that a pair of kids were hanging out in front of the elevator, and both stood up as I approached. Both girls had shotguns. Richard wants to talk to you, or the other one. The smaller of the two girls said she reminded me of Hiromi before. All neon and flare barking away to get attention, and to avoid anyone realizing she felt nervous. The other was quiet, a more firm grip on the tactician shotgun she was carrying. She at least carried herself like she knew how to shoot it, but from experience, that gun was too big for the girl, especially as it didn't have a stock. Tell him to come down to the basement then. I have some work I need to do, I told them, waving the bag in my left hand that had my suit and a spare laptop. Not that they knew that. They both scowled, but it was the taller girl that spoke up first. Richard wasn't asking. She started to demand, but she had let me get too close, and half a second later I jerked the shotgun straight out of her hands, and grabbed the barrel of the shorter girl's shotgun in the same moment. I just had to drop my bag to do it. I winced a bit as the laptop hit the floor. Hopefully it wasn't damaged. Don't. I told them, simply letting them understand that I had control of both of their weapons. I'm not a member of your gang. But we are working together now. If Richard needs something, he's welcome to come chat with me. I informed her, and noticed that despite everything, the smaller girl was still trying to jerk the shotgun out of my grip. Unfortunately, she was a teenage girl without any chrome, and I was a chromed-out gamer. Her attempts weren't able to even budge my arm. Fine. The taller girl ground out, seemingly realizing the situation was more dangerous than she expected. I nodded, and only after I was sure I had everything sorted did I let go of the barrel of the shotgun and offer to hand back the tactician to the tall girl. She didn't hesitate in snatching it back with a glare. I'm Martico, by the way. Since we will be sharing a building together in the future, I figured you should know. I offered, and the short girl scowled, looking like she wanted to raise the shotgun back up, but realizing it was dangerous as the taller girl settled her shotgun back in her hands with a nod. Mary, she offered, and then headed towards the elevator. The shorter girl followed after only a few seconds as she looked confused about why I wasn't being shot. I watched as they both headed up to the 5th floor, the floor the gang now controlled. I went ahead and accessed the elevator system through a scan and ordered it to come down. There literally wasn't a button to go to the basement, so only someone who had some netrunning skill could actually get down there. After a minute of me standing there waiting, since the old elevator had to go up, let the girls off and then come down, I finally reached my basement. It still seemed weird to consider it mine, but it really was. I looked over the array of equipment and had to shake my head. Some of this stuff was super high-end. I mean, just the fact he had server racks meant well the previous owner had been a damned good netrunner. There was that tier system with netrunners on where they were. I didn't think about it much, but it went like this. Tier 0. Using old systems, like a cyber modem, to access the net. No one really used this anymore except people just looking up info online. Usually if they were over 60. Tier 1. Which is what I had done for the most part. Just using my link cord into systems. Tier 2. Is what is considered real netrunning. Cyber goggles and other systems let someone view the net in actual dimensions, rather than just a flat screen. Of course, this is when people start overheating, so ice baths were this tier. If you weren't rich enough to buy a netrunner suit, you were Tier 2. Tier 3 is professional stuff. Netrunner suits were considered part of this tier. Usually adding in net chairs and bio monitors, that was all in this tier. Tier 4 was elite level. Server banks, potentially cryostasis chambers, and even direct blood cooling was all part of this tier, and was usually as high as someone could go without being a corpo. Vel had been around this level. The equipment he had left behind was expensive elite level stuff. And I wasn't about to stick my head into any of it, without doing a full checkup and wiping of basically everything. I would download all the data to drives for later look over, but no way was I connecting to his private server. He would definitely have some demon or black ice in there ready to kill. But there was another tier. Tier 5 gear was the crazy netwatch stuff. Things like a full Chrome installation that basically adds everything the previous tiers had but into mobile cyberware, letting someone netrun anywhere, and with better speeds and power. So I had a bunch of high-end stuff to start checking out. Thankfully, all of my netrunning skills meant I could actually do this. So I got to work. I connected my laptop into the server. Instantly it got attacked, and I sighed as it basically fizzled, shutting down. Yep. Expected. After a quick reinstall of the laptop, making sure it was back up and running, I started breaching the server like I would any other system. But since I knew how dangerous it was, I was using the skill from Ghost Touch to do it. Slowly sending bytes of data through side access ports until the small bytes would grow into an actual program that would give me access. Of course, I was interrupted long before I was finished. There was a beep going through the basement, and it took me a moment to check on the monitors along the wall that were connected to the security system that had been put into the complex. Richard was requesting access to the basement. Apparently there was a way to request access. He was standing in the elevator, an agent in his hand, and he was obviously waiting. I approved the request, sent the signal, and the elevator came down. Other than looking behind me at the monitors, I hadn't turned away from the server I was breaking into. Richard stepped out of the elevator into my basement with a certain confident stride as he walked over and stopped beside me. Richard. What's up? Mary said you wanted to talk? I asked, still distracted. There was a bit of data that I needed to send in through an infrared sensor that could take a few bytes, and it was a bit difficult to process the data right. I wanted to talk. To get to know my new chum. He skewed the way he said chum, obviously unhappy with the idea. I'm not your chum. Nor will I be. I don't have time or interest in joining your gang. I'm just someone who shares a building with you, and is more than willing to give you info from time to time on some good scores. I replied. We both know that isn't all you will do. SLS will crumble apart in weeks without income. I can't have my friends go and try to get protection money. This whole area is technically Valentino. But they don't care about small fry like us as long as we don't mess with their business. Can't do drugs, can't do a lot of theft in the area. Makes it hard to earn eddies. We'll talk to Hiromi then, she is the fixer type. I looked away from the server to meet his eyes. No, hold on. I muttered, pulling away from the server. It would hold for a while. As I did so, Richard watched, looking irritated and anxious. I can talk to her, the terms we worked out are fine, I guess. But she said you're the boss. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of the leader of my chums, but I'm not your boss. I rubbed the back of my head. Here, take a seat, we should really clear the air. This whole thing was a mess to begin with. I pointed him at a swivel chair beside the security monitors, probably Morgan's old seat, as I took the neck chair, sitting on it sideways to face him. Listen. I took a job from Wakako. Your group's thefts obviously pissed some powerful people off. Wakako almost didn't take the gig. You were still small time. Small enough she wasn't even interested in offering it to people, but I needed net running equipment. So she gave me this gig. I could have just killed all of you. I told him bluntly. My chrome finger pointing straight at his heart. It wouldn't have been tough. Silent, loud, whichever. You are lucky that I don't like killing kids. So I found a way to get the gig done without flatlining any of the kids Morgan had wrapped up in this shit. We could have taken you. We have good gear. Good security. He argued instantly, trying to regain some confidence from my own seeming threat. I could have started throwing grenades during that party last night. I told him bluntly, making him wince. By the time any of you would have even realized what was happening. Listen, you guys got really super lucky, and I'm not here to rule you as a street kid empress or something. But I'm also not enough of a bleeding heart to be your chum. I admitted, trying to convey my annoyance through my hands. You come in, ruin the first good thing that ever happened to us. Destroy us without even killing us, which... Okay, yeah, I appreciate we didn't have to call up any meat wagons, but still. You ruined what we were becoming, and now you want to just make friends? What do you want? I want this net running gear, and I want to be left alone. Hiromi saved me from having to haul this shit out of here, so that's great, but it makes us neighbors now. Which isn't something I was planning. Listen, Richard. I think you did a good thing helping out your chums, yeah? I'll do my best to keep the security of this place top notch. I'll even back you up if the apartments are ever attacked. I live here too now after all, but helping your gang isn't my priority, you know? Yeah. I know, he said, sound tired. We're street kids. We are never the priority. You probably don't get that though. What? Why wouldn't I? I'm a street kid too. I said. Even if it was only partially true. You're some corpo kids, aren't you? Nah. Just Hiromi. My family were all Tiger Claws, although I'm not really into the gang thing. I'm just a merc. Hiromi's parents are Arasaka though. Yeah, I figured. It's why we weren't gonna cause any problems. You really a street kid? You don't really act like one. I'm just weird. I told him with a thumbs up. But yeah, I live in a small apartment with my brother June, who is a TC enforcer. So listen, we get it. Even Hiromi. I don't want to mess with you, or your chums. I'm not like Morgan, who is going to use you and eventually make you take the fall for it. I told him, and he winced. Even if you were, we would still do the gigs. Morgan didn't need to convince us to take the gigs. We were willing. More eddies than any of us had ever seen just for a few gigs? He sighed. Even if it will all come crashing down on you? Of course. Even if we all die, it was worth it. We got to be something. Made this city know that we existed, he said hotly, as if caring about your own life was wrong. Fucking Night City. Fuck that, I'm gonna live to 180. I told him with a shrug. But listen. I'm not going to interfere with you and your chums. I'll help out with security, and maybe more if the pay is good, and in exchange, all I really ask is you keep anyone from trying to mess with my stuff. He nodded. Fine. I can accept that. Just maybe tell me if you see a good chance to make some eddies, he asked, sounding kind of beaten. I nodded, and that was pretty much that.